Salt Lake City. Hey, Jake, how are you? Salt Lake Jake. Salt Lake Jake.
Salt Lake Jake.
Welcome to Salt Lake Jake's Take. I am Salt Lake Jake, and we have a very special guest with us today, KSL.com's very own Josh Newman. Welcome, Josh.
Woo! How are things, guys?
Josh?
You know what? Things are good. Listen, first of all, let's just say about Josh, he joined us towards the end of the 2019 season, came from the East Coast, and offered something this market doesn't have, which is an outside perspective and somebody who's willing to call a spade a spade. Because as you know, Josh, being here, this market is full of a bunch of message board fanboys that are now in the media that run the show here, right?
You're trying to get me in trouble
right out the gate.
No, we're not taking that. Not taking that bait. No, sir.
Well, here's the thing, guys. We hear all offseason about will Cam Rising play or won't he play. You have people saying, oh, I have a friend who records the games. He says he's playing. You have the guy say, no, he's not playing. He's not playing until UCLA. People stress about it for 8 months. We talk about the ACL. Turns out about a day before we find out he's not coming, so people start stressing about the pig farmer. And what happens? The first play, a 70-yard deep post route to Money Parks for the score, and the place went nuts. Josh, when that happened, what was going through your brain?
It was insane. I mean, as you said, it's like 8 months of speculation and, rising in the ACL and trying to beat the timeline. And look, I'm willing to take Kyle Whittingham at his word, generally at face value when he speaks. And, he was a little more transparent during August than he usually is. Like, rising's limited. Things are progressing. There was some real optimism, like at the start of this week, Monday and Tuesday, that like maybe Rising would get cleared. Didn't happen. So, you have Bryson Barnes, who is more experienced and has a better like grasp on the offense than Nate Johnson. So no, it was no surprise that Bryson Barnes started that game. But yeah, look, I think I've watched that Bryson Barnes throw to Money Parks like 15, 20 times. And it's just fascinating because look, the snap, the offensive line really, really protected well. Barnes had like 4 or 5 seconds in the pocket, a lot of patience, stepped up. Money Parks had a step on his defender. Another defender came over to help. He whiffed. And, you have this like all-time Rice Eccles moment of the backup quarterback, right? The walk-on from Milford throwing this ridiculous touchdown pass. And it was awesome. The place was electric. Certain people in the press box were, definitely up and screaming, which you're, not supposed to do in the press box, but I digress. It was just a very cool moment after an off season of like a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions. And look, Bryson Barnes is like, and I just wrote this, this morning for KSL. Bryson Barnes at one time was like this near Rose Bowl hero after what he did against Ohio State, but now he's kind of turned into like this polarizing figure of, QB development and recruiting. And a lot of people, myself included, are like, why can't this staff recruit anybody that can wrestle away QB2 from Barnes? And look, if Brandon Rose were healthy, maybe, we're not having this conversation and Barnes doesn't see the light of day, but he was ready to answer the call when called upon. And I thought the most interesting thing here was, post game, we're asking Bryson Barnes about that first play. And he basically indicated that deep post, that was the plan, like for days. And they had, gotten a sense of like what Florida does on defense out of the gate, what their tendencies are. So I think Ludwig had that one dialed up for quite a while, it seems.
Yeah, it was definitely a moment, man. I was probably looking like those Taylor Swift fangirls at a concert after that first touchdown,
Jake,
because all the stress leading up to it. I take this way too seriously. I get it. But then all of a sudden, just this explosive play, this splash moment, opening game. You have an SEC premier program on the field in Florida, and we just go out there and do that. It was awesome, man.
Jake, was that the play you lost your voice on? Because you sound a little scraggly this morning.
Yeah, I probably. Right out the gate, I lost the voice. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
The funny thing about that is right before the opening play, I said, hey, how much money would you put on a handoff to Jaquinda Jackson up the middle for the first play of the game? I said, I'd at least go $100, maybe up to $500. Yeah.
That's a loser.
And then I think I read maybe you wrote this, Josh, that they went back and looked at their opening play for the last several seasons, and it's been a handoff like up the middle. And so they wanted to use that as kind of a decoy.
Yeah, and that's what made it so awesome, was just the fact that it came out of nowhere and it was this long, beautiful pass. You talk about Bryson Barnes being divisive, and you're right, because as you mentioned, he was kind of a Rose Bowl folk hero. He was this pig farmer from this 1A school. But I think it's a microcosm of Ute fans, like you said, are just kind of frustrated with him being our best option for the third year in a row, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's 100% accurate. I mean, you start thinking back to what year is it? You think back to the 21 season, and it was Brewer and Rising, and then Rising takes over. And I think backup quarterback did not come up at all during the 21 season. I think a lot of us sort of assumed that it was Jaquindon Jackson, and then Barnes comes into the Rose Bowl instead of Jaquindon Jackson, and you learn later that it was Jackson, and then Barnes had kind of supplanted him as number 2. And then going into 2022, it was obviously Rising unquestioned, and you had this summer competition between Barnes and Jackson for the backup, and Barnes wins that. And I think there's definitely a negative connotation attached to his walk-on status. Why is a walk-on able to do these things? And I'm not saying that he should be on scholarship, but I think there's definitely a bit of a negative connotation associated with his walk-on status. But look, he's been in the program. This is year 4 for Bryson Barnes under Ludwig. The only quarterback in the room who has more experience with this offense and working with Ludwig is Cam Rising. So Ludwig, to a very long extent, trusts Bryson Barnes. When we the times that we've talked to Ludwig here during fall camp, he was giving nothing but support and positive vibes about the job that Barnes could do if he had to start. And look, you could look at the raw numbers. You take away the 70-yard the 70-yard touchdown pass, he was essentially I don't have it in front of me, he was 11 of 15 or something for 89 yards. Not blowing you away, but look, Bryson Barnes did exactly what you needed him to do. He was mistake free. Okay, he sailed a couple of balls, he threw one into traffic, but for the vast majority of the night, he was mistake-free. He took care of the rock, and that's all you needed him to do. You don't need him slinging the ball all over the place. You don't need him throwing for 300 yards. You need him to do exactly what he did. Now, the way Utah played on offense last night, I don't think that's enough to beat Baylor, but, let's see how the week goes. Rising is apparently going to practice full next week. That doesn't mean that he'll be cleared for Baylor, but practicing full with no limitations, that is a positive sign. And look, I think one major bullet point coming out of last night is you can play 2 quarterbacks like they did with Rising and Nate Johnson. You can play them same series, even, which happened 2 or 3 times. You can play them with with trust that good things are going to happen. So certainly things to work on at the quarterback position, but I think you're coming out of last night with more positives than negatives at that spot.
Yep. And one last thought on the quarterback situation before we talk about other things is you could see why there's so much excitement with the potential that Nate Johnson has, but also you could see why Witt was so leery at throwing him in full bore, because he was really sloppy with the ball on several occasions. He had that dropped, fumbled pass where he lost control of it. He fumbled the snap they had to pick up. And there were a couple passes that he made man, that could have been an interception. It could have really change the flow of the game. So Nate definitely has that electric capability to him, as you can see on his touchdown run, where he just read that perfectly. He made an awesome cut around the 12-yard line, and then his burst of speed in the end zone was amazing. He's got this tantalizing skill that very few people have, but also, man, there was times just hold on to the ball. You can tell he was being a little loose with it. So you can see why he didn't go grab that job. I can tell. As far as other parts of the game, what is your concern level, Josh, with the run game? You look at the running back numbers, and nobody did anything. Jackson had 15 total yards. Jalen Glover had 4 carries for 6 yards. They just couldn't really get the ground game going. Do you feel that's more based on the game plan, based on the way Florida played it, or is there genuine concern with the running backs?
I mean, you're not going to have genuine like super concern over one game. It's a small sample size, but look, I did write this morning also. I mean, the running game was, on a milk carton, right? If you take away Mekhi Bernard's effort, he was good, right? He was a downhill, bruising type of runner. He ran the ball 7 times, like 3 or 4 of those. He put his shoulder down and picked up a few extra yards. But if Kyle is going to paint Jaquindon Jackson as the bell cow or the number one guy, the number one option, you have to get more out of Jaquindon Jackson. Certainly more than 5 for. What do you do? 5 for 15 yards. Look, it's not a concern yet, but I think it's going to get a little more interesting as we move forward here. Like, look, in a vacuum, you need a run game, but you've got 3 quarterbacks that can run. Like when Rising is back, assuming it, full health and he can do all the things he does, like you're going to see, 8, 10, 12 runs from Rising, whether they be by design or on a scramble. We talked about what Nate Johnson can do, right? That's going to be a change of pace. He's going to get some carries. Bryson Barnes, you're not going to see so many design runs, but like he can take off and go. So I probably overthought it, or I'm overthinking it, but like run game was a problem last night, and you don't want that to snowball because you even if it's Rising, you don't want to be throwing the ball 60% of the time, 65% of the time. They were 57% to the run last night. That's a good percentage, like 55, 45, somewhere in there, right? You want to run the ball, but you need to do a better job than you did last night.
Yeah, for sure. I was surprised. I don't know if I saw at one point that Jaquindon kind of hobbled off after one of his runs, asked out of the game. I don't know if that contributed to the fact that he only got 5 touches, but you expected when, like Witt said earlier in this week, he's the premier lead back. There's no like running back by committee, right? And so you don't expect more than 5 touches for Jaquindon, but maybe it's just the way the game. You always hear the adage, you take what the defense gives you. Maybe that's the way the game was going, and but yeah, we definitely if we want to get to where we want to get to this year, which is conversation about conference champion and off, a small chance at maybe even a playoff, we definitely need much improvement from the running game.
Jake, was the run block okay? Like, was there an issue with the line?
I didn't think so, but I'm not, as this podcast, we're just fans. We're not
Josh, what do you think?
Dive into the weeds, watching film kind of people. But I thought the line play was pretty good. Anything you can add there, Josh?
I mean, I'll save like the deep dive on the film for people like Bartle who like really understand the game better than I do. But I mean, I thought the protection like all night was pretty solid. There was certainly a couple of times where Spencer Fano right at left tackle got beat up a couple of times, but I mean overall, I thought it was solid. Was the lack of a run game because of the tone or how the game was going? Yeah, maybe, but it's just still not good enough. And again, not a huge concern just yet, but I mean, I think there was enough negative from that end of things last night where it's a thing to keep an eye on for sure.
Yep. Any other concerns that you have coming out of that game, Josh?
I mean, look, you were missing a lot of guys due to injury. None of those things are season ending. Kyle said on Monday that he was expecting, half a dozen guys to either be limited or to be out entirely. At the time, I had Rising and Keithy in that group. We had kind of known, that Junior Tafuna was banged up. We knew that Samote Peppa was banged up. So yeah, Tafuna out, Samote Peppa out. That's your 2 interior tackles. Connor O'Toole is, your leading tackler along, the defensive line. And look, you may do with your depth, and that's why you build a program, and that's why you recruit, and that's why you had depth, because other guys played really well in place of the guys that were out. But if you want to accomplish the things that you think you can accomplish, whether that be the Pac-12 down the road, even the college football playoff down the road, you need to get healthy, because you're going to run into better teams than you did last night. So at some point here, you need to get healthy.
Yep. As far as bright spots go, a couple that I wanted to point out that I was impressed with. He didn't have any scoring plays, but I thought Mikey Matthews, as a true freshman, had a really good debut. I believe he had 4 catches, but he just seemed like a kid that gets it. Like you can just tell somebody belongs on the field, and I think the future is bright for him. I was also Jonah Ellis was awesome out there.
Yeah.
As we know, he wasn't highly recruited. He was one of our lower rated recruits from his class, but he just 2 sacks. He had that deflected pass on 4th down to end the game, essentially. And he just, I don't know, was living up to his father's name, right?
Yeah,
is
I
there
felt
any
like
other bright spots, Josh, that you think you can take away from this game?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll echo Jonah Ellis. I mean, look, he was hurt for a lot of last year, right? And he missed the Rose Bowl. So last night was, satisfying, right? And he's part of that depth, right? There were some injuries. So here comes Jonah Ellis with 2 sacks of the 5 that Utah had the pass deflection to end the game. He's a hardworking kid, right? And he comes from, obviously huge genes, and there's a name to live up to. So he really played well. I'm trying to think anybody else beyond what you said. Mikey Matthews and Jonah Ellis. You know what? Let's say Jack Baumeister. Jack Baumeister had a tremendous night. Had a punt of 61 yards and a punt of 64 yards. First time since 2014 that a Utah punter banged 2 in a game of 60 plus. That was Tom Hackett back in 2014. So if you've been watching this program even for the last 2 or 3 years, back to like Cameron Peasley in 2021, like you understand the problems that the punting game had in terms of hang time and get off time and punts getting blocked and punts getting returned for touchdowns. So Kyle has talked up Jack Baumeister here, that his leg is stronger, that he's in a really good place. Baumeister looked awesome last night.
Yeah, he was hitting some rockets, man. One last bright spot I want to point out: Cole Bishop, man, is a dog.
Yeah.
We knew that going in. Led the team in tackles, 11 tackles, 9 solo tackles, and his sack was a thing of beauty. You watch it, the running back tries to block him, and he just basically just throws him aside, throws him on the ground and goes after the quarterback. He was a bright spot, man. You can see why he's getting hyped for potential All-American, because he was spectacular. One last thought on this game before we talk about Baylor for a minute. I wanted to point out that a game like this, even though Florida's down, it's still an SEC power program that has a name. This is why you cancel the BYU series time and again for games like this, because this type of hype and pub we were getting, the only real show on Thursday night, defending Pac-12 champ versus SEC Florida, and we open up with a huge bomb. Like, that kind of publicity is how you build your brand and get your name out there. If we were playing BYU, yes, there'd be eyeballs on it, but it's just different. Games like this matter. It helps with the branding. It helps with the name recognition. So I was glad that we were able to do this every now and then. Michigan a few years ago, Florida. So
yeah,
all the BYU babies that sit out there and whine and cry like they do about every little thing. Take a hike, man. Go pound sand. This was good. Okay, so going into Baylor, I don't know a ton about Baylor. I know they were okay last year, not great. But kind of the vibe I get is that we'll have to be a lot better than we were last night, especially offensively, to get this win on the road. Let's assume, Josh, that Cam doesn't go again, and we go with the same Bryson Barnes, Nate Johnson package. What do we got to do to come away with this win against Baylor?
You need to figure out the run game. As I said, I mean, you just can't be putting so much stuff on Barnes. And look, again, like Barnes did what you asked him to do. If they're going to beat Baylor, he's probably going to have to make a few more throws. You probably have to open up a playbook a little more. The vast majority of the play calling after the bomb was like short intermediate. You really weren't taking many chances. Does Brand Keithy play in that game? I think that would be a huge help to Barnes, because Keithy is obviously a guy that you can target 8, 10, 12 times, and he's going to get you 6, 8, 9 catches. So you need to figure out the run game. Barnes is probably going to have to do more than he did. And defensively, look, we'll see who's healthy and we'll see who's not, and we'll see who returns. Can they get Tafuna back? Can they get Peppa back? But I think defensively, especially with the game that Morgan Scalley called, I think the defense is in a really good place. The way the defense played last night is good enough to beat most opponents on your schedule. I don't know that defense last night, with all the backups, I don't know that you beat USC with that defense. I don't know if you beat Washington, but you can beat Baylor with that defense. I think a lot of the onus for this game in 8 days falls on the offense and how much of a step how much of a step Bryson Barnes can take, and how much do you continue to trust Nate Johnson? As you said, I mean, 2 fumbles, certainly some jitters. The 27-yard touchdown run, certainly gave you optimism that he can do the job. But the offense as a whole is going to have to be better for sure.
Agreed. And like you mentioned with the defense, I thought the defense was good, really good. We were a centimeter away from that ball touching the ground to completely shutting them out of the end zone all night, right? On that 4th down pass. It could have gone either way. If they had called that pass incomplete, I think the call would have stood as incomplete. So, but yeah, we were a centimeter away from just shutting them out, holding them to 3 points. The defense bowed their neck when they had to, especially on 3rd down. 1 for 13 on 3rd down is incredible. You do that, you're going to win every game. If you hold every team to 1 for 13 on 3rd down, you're going to win every game. So I think the defense is good enough to hold Baylor in the teens, maybe low 20s. But we do need a little more production out of the offense, and who knows? Maybe we get surprised and Cam trots on the field, but I'm guessing it'll again be Barnes and Nate Johnson. Pete, Brennan, any other last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Couple of game notes. Number one, they totally whiffed on not playing Small Town by John Cougar Mellencamp. Just honestly, Jeremy also pointed that out on Twitter, and come on, that's an easy. That was a layup. Number two, Jonah Ellis totally deserves to tuck his jersey under his pads like his old man. Let's go. And then let's see. What else? No, I loved it. I loved it. That was the best beginning to a season I've seen in years. The Michigan game was great, but I'm jacked. I'm ready for this season.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to tell me before you're going to open up with a 24-11 win against Florida, I would have taken that 10 times out of 10, right? Regardless of the struggles we had on offense in the second half, regardless of how Florida started to move the ball, which I think was partially due to the fact that they were down 3 scores and had to throw, and we were getting really aggressive, and they were kind of beating us on the edges with our aggression. I think it was a great opening weekend. Peter, I know you had one. You had a couple.
I want to ask
Josh.
I mean, this is rare for us to get the illustrious Josh Newman on our pod.
Illustrious.
Here. I mean, listen, Jake pointed it out. You come into this market, guy from New Jersey, covering Rutgers, and what I appreciated about you from early on was your gumshoe kind of old school journalism ethic. And, you were talking about guys cheering in the press box. That's a new thing. What is the state of journalism now? And are you going to stay in this market? Will you be here for a while?
Oh, I really should have texted you not to ask me that beforehand.
I'll cut it out.
No, you're okay. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's been a tough summer for the people that are not aware. No longer at the Salt Lake Tribune. I'm freelancing for KSL.com. For as long as I'm here, Josh Furlong, right, the sports director at KSL.com, has been a good friend and a good confidant, and he'll essentially let me do, whatever I want, but I'm not neck deep in it like I was at the Trib. So yeah, we'll keep writing for KSL.com for a little bit. Who knows what the future holds? In terms of the state of journalism, I mean, look, there's always, big picture, this business. Look, I've been out of school for Bryce, what year is it? I've been out of school for 19 years. Okay, I've been a professional journalist for 19 years, and there's just a constant state of peaks and valleys. I think the profession at the moment is in a pretty deep valley. That's due to any number of factors, just budgets getting slashed, and I could talk about this all day, but I don't know what the future holds for journalism. I'll say this. I mean, I like mentoring college kids. They ask me for advice. I try to help them. I want to be, that guy, because I didn't have a lot of that when I was their age. So I want to be helpful. It's getting harder and harder to give these kids advice or tell them what I think, because it's a fine line between, you want to be honest with them, but if that's your dream, if that's what you want to do, right, you want to get into sports journalism, you don't want to kill the dream for them by being too honest. So I've got a lot of experience, both good and bad. So, again, I try to I try to be a sounding board for, high school and college kids whenever they do reach out.
Well, appreciate you answering that. And if honestly, you're a gift to the market. So like
right.
there is value. I see it.
No one's doing the stories that you're doing, Josh, or the in-depth, like Peter said, the gumshoe type, journalism. And it's really fascinating to read about these players, about their backgrounds, about what makes them tick. That's so much more important than just the score at the end of the game, and we on this podcast really appreciate that.
And look, that's a credit. And look, I need to say this, like, that's a credit to the, the athletic communications folks at Utah, because look, they're the conduit between me and the players. And like, they're not giving me, they're the ones giving me access, and credit to them. When I come to them with an idea, whether it was at the Tribune or now, I don't know if you guys read the Cam Rising, profile that I wrote the other day,
yeah.
But, I toss an idea out to them, and look, like 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, like they're at least very receptive, and they're wanting to tell these players stories. And at a bare minimum, I think despite my circumstances, I think I walked into KSL like still having, the respect of the people that I'm dealing with in Utah. So that's been a huge benefit. If there's any, aspiring journalists listening out there, please, thank you, sir, ma'am, like very like lost arts go a long way. Okay. And that's probably advice for life. Okay. Sir, ma'am, please, thank you.
Yeah. And that, I mean, just as an example, that article you published, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, about Cam Rising's injury and his rehab. I mean, that was some great insight about where he was getting his rehab done, what his father was thinking at the Rose Bowl, all those insights that you just don't get through a
tweet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
All right, gentlemen, we appreciate all your time. Mr. Newman, thank you for joining us. Your insights are valuable. We thank you, sir. We hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend as we get ready for the next game against Baylor. Like I said, fellas, you can't go 15-0 without going 1-0, and that's what matters. We came away with the dub. We beat a SEC premier program on opening night on ESPN, and we did it with our 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks, baby. So I'm coming out of that. I'm feeling good. Let's go. Let's beat Baylor. I am Salt Lake Jake, and I am out.
Jake in Salt Lake City. Hey, Jake, how are you? Salt Lake Jake. Salt Lake Jake.
Salt Lake Jake.
Salt Lake Jake.